left off yesterday, which was right here, and we got on to the types of motherboards. Does this work now? Does this not work? What'd you do? You did something. It's not catching it at all. Let's see. If I unplug that, I will see if I do this, if it gets it back together. See if it works now. Yes. There we go. Okay. So I told you in this class we're working mainly with the ATX motherboard. We had what were called AT motherboards in the beginning and baby ATs. Really we're looking at ATX and BTX is what we have here at school, and mainly we're looking at the ATX motherboard. When we look at the ATX motherboard, and I know that I've gone through this a number of times, it's always lined up with the back panel connectors, the processor, and then the memory modules with all the other stuff off to the side in our computer. When we talk about ATX form factor, it has specific holes that line up, and this is a micro ATX case. It only screws into those, right, when we put that one in there. But if we were doing a full-size ATX, we might come down to these, or even go out here to that for the ATX. But the big thing is, all these holes for an ATX are specific for what side of the PC, and then all the holes have to line up to fit inside the PC as well. Okay. So on our motherboard, we have our CPU and our CPU chipset, and we talked about chipsets just briefly in Chapter 1, and that being the Northbridge chip and the Southbridge chip. The CPU, that's our brains of our computer, has a rating, and its rating is rated 3 different ways. It's rated by the speed of the CPU, the cache of the CPU, and now the number of processors. You can't go out there and buy a CPU anymore that only has one processor on it. Most of them, as we go and look at them, the low-level computer anymore, if we were to go out and buy a processor, the low-level processor has 2 cores or 2 processors on the CPU. And then we have quad-core processors, quad-core here. We can go up to 8 cores. Let's see if we got one in there. Let's look at the motherboard, sockets. So I'm looking up here, and we've got a 6-core CPU, a 6-core CPU, an 8-core CPU. So processors, you can see, we don't have any of those, but that's $1,049 for that CPU. Okay? So when we look at processors, we don't just look at, hey, here's the speed, it's so many megahertz or so many gigahertz. So when I look at this processor here, we'll go ahead and open this one up. The first thing that everybody sees is that gigahertz rating, okay? How many gigahertz is the processor? And that is important. That is important. It used to be the only way, and that's why that's not on this slide, that used to be the main and only way that people looked at the speed of the CPU. Because if there's only one, then the speed is the most important thing, right? Because you only have one. So that used to be the biggest thing. The second biggest thing is the amount of memory that's on the processor. So a processor, the motherboard has memory that plugs into it, but also the CPU has memory. And the amount of memory that's on that processor will determine how often it has to go out to the motherboard. So that's the second thing we look at when we're looking at speed of CPUs. This one has 20 meg of L3 cache. That is a lot of memory on that CPU. That is a lot. I mean, a ton of memory on a CPU, which is why it's $1,049. And on top of that, it has 256K per processor. So each processor has its own 256K of memory. That's why it says 8 times 256, because there's 8 cores on this one. And then it shares that other 20 meg of cache. Okay? So when we're looking at speed of processors, we're looking at two things. We're looking at the speed in gigahertz. Okay? 3 ways we measure the speed of a processor when we're going to look at it. So we look at the speed in gigahertz, the amount of cache it has, and the number of processors, and we look at those equally. You know, I'm not saying we look at this and then this and this, because if I go and look at a CPU, like the quad core that's in my laptop, okay? My laptop has 4 1.8 gigahertz processors, okay? And yours, it's on your laptop. By the way, I bought it and a separate processor online. I turned it into that. Yours has 2.4 gigahertz processors. Okay? Which one's better? This one isn't necessarily better than this one. It depends on what programs you're running. If you're running a game that does not use multiple cores, like older games did, older games can only access one core. So it's going to run faster on your laptop, because every core of yours is faster than every core of mine. However, if you're running a game that can spread its processes out over multi-cores, then the total of mine is better than the total processing power of yours. So it depends on what you're trying to run. If you're doing multiple applications at one time, if I've got virtual machines running stuff, mine's going to run that better than this one that's trying to share those processes over a 2.4. I will tell you, for what we do on everyday computer stuff, yours is better. Okay? Because you usually aren't doing 3 or 4 things at one time. This is going to make a difference if I have 30 windows open in Firefox. But if I got one window open in Office, yours runs faster. Okay? So it's one of those things that you have to weigh. You'll also have to look at the amount of cache. Mine may have more cache than yours. I actually don't know what the cache is on mine off the top of my head on my laptop. And that will make it go to the memory less often. So this is great. Awesome to be able to have that in my computer, because then I have every single one of my cores is about as fast as they go. They do have ones that go up to 4 gigahertz. Intel does not. AMD has some that are 4 gigahertz processors. Okay, whether or not they're faster, we'll look at some ratings when we get to CPUs and say which CPU is faster than the other ones, and you'll see on some of those ratings that a 3 gigahertz overall rates out faster than a 4 gigahertz in some of those tests. So when we look at CPUs, we got our CPU on our motherboard, okay, and that socket that we talked about the other day determines what CPU we can put in it. We've got our chipset that controls the flow of information around the motherboard, and then when we look at CPUs, we rate them by speed, memory, and number of processors that are on the motherboard. We've got 2 manufacturers of processors. Everybody knows Intel. Intel holds a vast majority of the market, okay? But it is not the only game in town. In fact, most of our servers here at Trail are AMD servers, because I could buy an 8-core AMD far less expensively than a comparable Intel one. Intel does advertising. Have you ever seen an AMD advertisement? Probably not. You may see AMD more often at discount places like Walmart, because they are less expensive and they can build a better PC less expensively. An AMD one doesn't mean it's better or worse. In fact, there have been times where throughout history, right now Intel is faster predominantly than AMD, but there have been times when AMD has been faster than Intel. But a lot of times, money matters. For a long time, everything I had in my house was an AMD, because whenever I built a PC, and I'm looking at Intel one, and I'm looking at one that was $1,049 right there, it has 8 cores. I'm going to go back here and go back to CPUs and processors as a new page, and I'm not going to pick out, I'm going to pick AMD processors instead. I'm going to go down here and pick, just let me pick, there we go, manufacturer AMD, and I am going to go and pick the highest, the most expensive AMD one to compare with the most expensive Intel one. See the most expensive AMD one? It's $259. It's 1/4 almost the price of the Intel one. And it's got 8 cores, 4.7 gigahertz, 8 cores. Okay? It's got less cache, which is why sometimes when I look at those, and I'll look at Topps Hardware and a couple other sites, it's got less total memory. So even though, this one up, this page, maybe, there we go. Even though this number is higher, the fact that the cache is lower may mean they run at the same speed. We'd have to look at some comparison charts. But that's pretty phenomenal difference in price between their 4.7 gigahertz, 8 core, and the Intel 3 gigahertz, 8 core. Look at the difference in the price. And that's why sometimes when we build a server, we'll build one with an AMD processor in it, and I'll accept the fact that maybe has less CPU cache, because it's really sometimes not doing that big of calculations anymore. It depends on how you look at it. And there are sites that all they do is compare. You can go and look and see. There we go. CPU cache. Passmark is a great one. I use this for video cards too. To compare, we're going to go high-end CPU chart. To compare the speeds of those CPUs. If you look at it, look at Intel. The AMD doesn't even get on here until, this is only showing the Intels. Maybe I'm looking on that only shows the Intel high-end CPU. Really, it doesn't even get an Intel until where? An AMD. I have a hard time believing that. It's that much less. Look at that. So down here, way down here with that AMD 8 core. Is that the same one? FX 959 FX? It is. That is that processor right there. So you can see for the price, I guess they're saying that you're getting the same thing out of one that's $349. Is that the highest AMD one? Look at the highest rank one on here is on the 2.3 gigahertz. I want to look at this 2.3 one right there and see how much cache it has, because the difference has got to be the amount of cache that's on that motherboard. Let's see if I can. I'm going to go to a sales site if I can. Let's see if I can find it. Where's the link? Let's see if I can just do this. 645, 95. So the cache has got to be what's making that one run.
Interruption, but all seniors going on the field trip today
So look,
need to report to the high school foyer.
It's got 30 meg of cache. Okay, so it's got 4 times more memory than that other one. Oh my gosh, $2,300. That's how I got mad. That's an expensive CPU. I'm not putting that one in my. This one's got 35 meg of cache. By the way, the cache isn't like PC memory. It's not. It's a totally different kind of memory. It's not like. You can say, well, I've got 8 gig in my computer, and it's only got, well, it's a different kind of memory, and it has a lot less. But so if I looked at that one, let's see, this one had 20 meg, this AMD one only had 8 meg, and that's why even with the higher speed, same number of cores, that obviously that amount of memory is making a huge difference on how fast the processor works. So I've got AMD and Intel as my 2 major manufacturers. Intel processors, we talked about this the other day, mainly use LGA, land grid array sockets that have just those dots on the back. And AMD mainly uses, and I have to update this and put the FM socket on there as well, mainly uses PGA, or ones with the pins on them, mainly, okay? So we already talked about this. We were looking at it the other day. Processors connect to the motherboard via some kind of socket. Okay, and it's very definitive what those different sockets are. LGA is an Intel slot, and the AM and FM are the AMD sockets. And when we go and look at one of the links that I've got for you on the hardware site, And I'm going to open that link up now, I guess. It's actually hidden, but I'll unhide it. Down here in motherboards, because when you guys are looking at buying, and we're going to do that starting Tuesday. When you're looking at buying your processor, or your motherboard, you want to make sure you get the most current socket. So just as I'm looking at all these, blue is Intel, green is AMD, and I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom. So the most current AMD socket is the FM1, which is the most current one for a regular PC, and you can see back, I just scrolled back a little too far. We had the AM, AM2, the AM3, which are all PGA sockets. And then down here, you can, by the way, it says PGA or LGA. You can see these were server series sockets. This is G34 and C32, and I have never seen a computer that uses them. So those are LGA, you can see, but majority of the time, the green ones are PGA, 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 and the opposite is true of the blue ones. Any of the ones that are Intel anymore, LGA, 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 LGA. So as you're going to look at your motherboards and pick out the motherboard that you're going to buy for your gamer case, if you're not using one of these down here, if you don't pick an LGA 1248, by the way, the number is how many pins there are. Okay, so when it says this is a, let's see, what socket is this? This is a, I think this is a 478, and then there's 478 pins. When the other one, when this one is a LGA 775, it means there are 775 dots on there. So obviously you could not use an LGA 1248 in a socket for a 775, because this has 775 connectors to the motherboard, and this one has 1248 connectors. This one has 1156 connectors on it. Okay. So as we get to the point where you're picking out your motherboards, you don't want to go so cheap that you pick an old processor socket that then you can't even buy the processor for it new anymore. So you want to, as I'm looking at these, you want to stay down here in things that have been out since 2010. Okay? You don't want to look back, for instance, at the AM2 socket, which came out in 2006. It's 8 years old. It's a lot slower. You're going to find some stuff cheap there, but it's not going to be nearly as responsive as what you want to look at now. You can see the AM2 socket ran as fast as 1,000 megahertz, and then when you get down here, we're looking at 3,000 megahertz. So it's 3 times slower for those. And then we started measuring differently. We started measuring giga transfers per second. But anyway, so we've got all these sockets down here at the bottom of the socket list. You want to stay down here in things that came out. And I will say that you could go as far back as 2009 if you get AMD, back as far as the AM3 Plus, but nothing older than that. Because really, the FM and the AM3 Plus are the only one you're going to find sockets, find processors for anymore. This one, this AMD, is an AM3 Plus, so it's still current, the fastest one they have. That's what I'm saying. The AM3 and the FM are the only two that we really want to look at on this list. Pop it around. Did I close it? Oh, okay. So I want to go down, stay down here with the 3s on down. Somewhere down here, I don't want to go back as far as the 2 plus. I want to stay down here with these faster processors down here. Okay, back to where we were. So we've got those sockets that we're looking at. I need to update them. I can't update it while I'm writing on it, so yeah, I'm going to update it later. So we're going to look at, I'll update it later. Hopefully I'll remember to this time. We looked at this the other day, what the LGA socket looks like. It's got that hook on there. If I see this and I ask you what kind of CPU is this, probably what the CPU manufacturer is. Again, Intel, the LGA sockets, and for the PGA sockets, they're mainly going to be AMD sockets. Okay, when I ask you that. Anytime we have a CPU, we have to also have a CPU cooling fan. You guys are going to be picking out CPUs in the second project that you do, and along with that, you have to pick out an appropriate cooling fan. They come with them many times, like this Intel cooling fan. This is a stock cooling fan that comes with this one and is made to go with the CPU. Now, the problem with stock cooling fans is they're not your best cooling fans. AMDs traditionally have run hotter than Intel chips. But anymore, they're all running so fast that if you don't, the more cooling you have, the cooler you keep the CPU, the faster it will run. So if I go and buy one that comes with a stock cooling fan that's got 8 cores on it, and I'm really going to be running stuff fast, I really want to run good stuff on it, I'm going to run the best game, or I'm going to use it as a server, I don't want to use that stock cooling fan. I want to go out there and find something like this. This is an all-copper cooling fan that will dissipate heat far better and cool my processor down far better than the stock little aluminum that came with it. Okay? Those do not do as good a job cooling our computers down. Copper is way better than aluminum, so whenever you see a copper cooling fan, it's probably higher quality. For a couple years, we had a whole bunch of, it's gotten expensive, we had a whole bunch of ones that had copper heat sinks in it, and before we threw them away, we pulled out every single heat sink, and we made about $150 to recycle and paste heat sink. So, most of them do not have nice copper ones anymore. Okay, also on the motherboard, we have the chipset that controls the memory, the buses, the peripherals. It controls all the communications around the motherboard, and they connect everything up and bridge the information between the CPU and the motherboard, or the CPU and the rest of the things in the motherboard. And we talked about this in chapter 1. The North Bridge is fast. It's for graphics and memory. Okay, and when we look at a motherboard, all of them are going to have heat sinks on them. The biggest heat sink you see on a motherboard is always going to be the North Bridge chipset. This one is so old that the South Bridge doesn't even have a heat sink on it. And this is the same way. This is old enough. The North Bridge has a little heat sink. The South Bridge doesn't have one. However, current motherboards, if you look at a current gaming motherboard, you're going to see let's see, gaming. No, that's not where I want to go. Hardware. Up there. Motherboards. I'm just going to grab, let's see if we can grab an Intel motherboard. And when it says Intel, it's not saying made by Intel, it's saying for an Intel CPU. I'm just going to go ahead and grab this gaming motherboard and show you what I'm talking about. When we look at the photos on this one, we have this huge heat sink here and another huge heat sink there. Let's see if we can bigger picture of the heat sinks that are cooling off. That's the one for the North Bridge. They're cooling out the whole North Bridge chipset, and then this is the one down here for the South Bridge. This is one of the protected gamer ones. It's hard to see as well. Let's see if I can get it better. You can see it. Looks about the same, I think. You've got the North Bridge up here, and here's the South Bridge pulling the heat sink on that one. But you can see it still has a heat sink. It's better, they run hotter than they used to. And there's it showing the Intel chipset right underneath there. It runs that motherboard. And let's see. So on the motherboard, the chipset basically controls the memory and the transfer of information between the CPU, and then also controls the information that's going out to the expansion slots as well. The chipset's in charge of all the communications. Okay, so the computer buses. This is my little graphic I made. Okay, so the north route bus controls the memory and the video card. The south route bus controls everything else, which includes network cards, sound cards, mouse, keyboards, anything else connected to the computer, hard drive, CD-ROM, any flow of information around the computer that's on the south route is everything except for video and memory information, okay? So the north route has priority for those things, and it runs much faster and much hotter as those things get moved around the bus. And obviously it doesn't look as split out and logical as this, but you need to know that the north route controls memory and video, and the south bus route, the south chipset, controls everything else. It moves around between the CPU and the various components. That's what those routes control. Okay, so there's another part of it that we talked a little bit about. And that's the width of the bus. When I first got into computers, the bus width was only 16 bits. And for the majority of the last few years have been 32 bits. And now we're up to a 64-bit bus. What that means is the size of the package of information that moves around that north and that south bus route. And these, anything you buy today, is going to be capable of doing 32-bit or 64-bit performance. The downside of 32-bit is it limits your memory to 4 gigabytes of RAM that you can use in the motherboard. You can only access 4 gigabytes of RAM. So you guys have Windows 7 32-bit on your computer, but you only have 2 gig of RAM, so that's fine. My servers have 32 gig of RAM in them, so they have to have a 64-bit operating system. So the packets of information that move around the bus are larger, and that's what the width of the bus refers to. And here you can see how the bus speeds have changed and how the width of the bus, it used to be as small as 8 bits. I wasn't using it when it was back at 8 bits, I don't think. But now we're looking at 64-bit bus, which are both the CPU and the bus has to handle it, but anything anymore does 64-bit performance because no one makes anything that only handles 4 gig of RAM. Okay, so we need to also understand the kind of slots. This is the old one. ISA slot stood for Industry Standard Architecture. If you find a motherboard with that on there, you have found a really old motherboard, okay? They're black. It's really old. AGP stood for Advanced Graphic Port, and it was advanced at one time. Again, it's really old. But PCI slots, which we talked about the other day, which stands for Peripheral Component Interconnect or extra stuff plug-in spots, okay? PCI slots are still current today. They are the low-end slot today. Whereas here on this motherboard, this was low-end, this was high-end, and this was high-end. Now, this is the low-end of current motherboards. Slide. Oop. Because now PCI are the kind of the standard one, and then on top of that we have these longer PCI X16s, which are the ones that video cards plug into, and they always have a latch at the end. They always have some kind of latch at the end of it. This latch on this PCI Express 16 is just like this. It's just this little green unlocky thing. On some of them, there's a whole lever arm that you have to move. Some of them have a button that unlock them. But the PCI Express 16 slots, okay, are for video cards, and they have little locks on the end. Okay, so these are two different terms that you need to know. PCIe stands for PCI Express. These are all PCIe connectors. PCI Express 16 times, PCI X 1 time, and you see it's a little tiny. And then there's a PCI X4. This should say 4 or 2. I think this is 2. It's a 2 right there. And then a 4 is just a little bit bigger. It goes 1, 2, 4. Then 8 and 16 look the same size. Okay, and these are for video cards. And PCI X stands for extended. They make a PCI X slot that goes way out longer, and it's a 64-bit slot. And there aren't many that have those. But these can be all different colors. When I look at this one, here's the PCI. Am I running out of time? We're almost out of time now. So we've got the 1, the 4, the 8 and the 16, and they really multiply if we look at the amount of speed that those go through, and you can see the difference as I look at those in length as well. So next class, there's going to be a blended video and article that you guys read, and then we're going to talk about the article, the assignment itself, and then Thursday you're going to start doing your research for the assignment. Thursday and Friday, and the following Thursday and Friday, and next Friday we're going to do the presentation. You guys have a nice weekend. I actually think I got through everything. Yep, I did. Yay me. Control L. Good morning, Paul. Good morning. How do I make this fill in the back? Auto solve properties. Text fill. Fill effects. Object transparency. It's
Real life editing.
Why does it not say I have a fill effect? I want a fill.
Don't touch!
And he was in our.
I forgot to do that.
Maybe it's. Is it the
Pocket.
Yeah.
Steal it.
Hey, the dad has
They didn't steal it. Oh my gosh.
I don't know, I'm trying to think of it.
Oh, I know what kind of book this is. What's it for? Wow. Remember he told us it's special because the 8 turn is for the fucking.
LGA 1156. Alright, let's say 1155.
Obviously, it's a
25 and higher.
always likes that.
So after the weekend. Now, we have to take a certain amount.
Okay, put your stuff away. Why is that stuff out? I'm sorry. Put all that stuff away. You guys gotta get your PC back.
Just logged in.
Put one of those on each of your desks. Everybody needs to get your PC.
I'm
Yeah, what are
leaving
you
mine.
doing? I'm like, what are you doing? One of these needs to be on each of your desks. Oh,
Well, I need mine to charge.
getting at your laptop. You know what we were doing? You guys didn't get your stuff done last
We
time.
did?
I had to put your
Well-
stuff together.
Now I'll get yours.
One of these. It doesn't have your name. Put your names on tomorrow. Just take. No, those are the other boxes. Take yours. Take one. Move out of my way. Yeah.
What's this
I'll just put mine back.
Do I just need to take one?
In dragons?
Meanwhile, I have it ready.
Hang it, I was gonna give you turn a blocker. Oh god. Nope, that's not a good idea. Here,
I'm missing a screw. Do I really want this one?
Hey, sheesh! Stop talking to me. I'm working on something here. I'm working on something
I'm gonna get a
here.
different one. Or you don't.
What socket?
Where's
is
your
this?
screwdrivers?
Wait, do you want us to open this or no?
Yes, I want you to open it up and then wait.
I was swipe this.
Yo,